As we all know, 5 states are going to the polls now. Which are these? Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Goa and Manipur. Now, I list these 5 in the order of the number of seats they contribute to national parliament. So 80 for Uttar Pradesh, everybody knows, 13 for Punjab, and then 4 for Uttarakhand and 2 each for Goa and Manipur. Now you're reading a lot of coverage on Uttar Pradesh, which is understandable. Saturation coverage. You're also seeing a lot, say, on Punjab. For various reasons, Punjab is a very important state. It's next door to Delhi. There is also the context of the recent farmers movement, and really, two of the main campaigners in Punjab are prime comedians, and I mean professional comedians. I don't mean it as a judgmental term. So, Navjot Singh Sidhu, as well as Bhagwant Mann of Aam Aadmi Party, who's the presumptive chief ministerial candidate for that party, and Sidhu, who's the head of the Congress party in the state, are both professional comedians, so they make for greater fun stories. But you see a lot on Uttarakhand, all right, again, not that far from Delhi, sort of a part of the heartland. Then you hear a lot more on Goa than you hear on Manipur. In fact, you hear almost nothing on Manipur. It's as if it is the most unimportant state or the smallest state in the polls. That is not correct. While you read so much coverage on Goa, the fact is that compared to Goa's population of 17 lakh, Manipur is almost twice as much. It was about 29 lakhs in the 2011 census. So it's about 33, 34 lakhs right now, so twice the population of Goa. And yet we hear very little about it. Why? Because it's out of sight, out of mind. We think about these smaller northeastern states only when trouble erupts for us from there. For us means for people who are sitting comfortably in Delhi. In fact, when I used to be a correspondent posted in the northeast, the place where I lived was Shillong in Meghalaya, and I hardly ever wrote a story about Meghalaya because there was no trouble in Meghalaya. So my friends in Meghalaya would ask me, so Shekhar, how many Indians do we have to kill? It was a joke. How many Indians do we have to kill in Meghalaya so you can get a front page byline in the Indian Express? So the reason these states erupt in trouble is that we treat them with this out of sight, out of mind approach. That's why I thought it's important for us to talk about Manipur as well. As I told you, a state of just over 30 lakh people. BJP is in power. Right now, if you ask anybody, they'll say, oh, odds are that BJP will come back to power. And those odds are not based, usually I would not say those things, but those odds are not based so much on any psephology or any opinion polls or any election analysis. They are based on the presumption that as long as BJP gets a sizable number of seats in the 60-member house, it will rule, because then by jod, tod, jugaad, hook or crook, it will rig up a majority. And on what is that, on what evidence is this presumption based? That is because in 2017, BJP got 21 seats in the house of 60, Congress party got 28. So Congress party was just 3 short of the majority mark, whereas BJP was 10 short of the majority mark. But Congress party, as usual, one, they were lazy. Second, I think they were also treating Manipur as out of sight, out of mind, although they did something similar with Goa as well. So Congress party took their eye off the ball. BJP meanwhile moved in. BJP then quickly went and signed up with 2 regional parties there. 2 regional parties are National People's Party, and it's an interesting party. I will tell you more about it. National People's Party, which had 4 MLAs, and Naga People's Front, which had 4 MLAs as well. Naga People's Front, as you can imagine, is a party which is focused on the Naga areas of the state, which is mainly the Ukhrul district, where Thingaling Umaiva, who is the leader in his late 80s now of the Naga insurgencies and has been negotiating with India. He's the head of NSCN, National Socialist Council of Nagaland. He comes from Ukhrul in Manipur. So the party that dominates that area got 4 seats the last time, and National People's Party got 4 seats. Then 1 from TMC, BJP got to defect. Now this 8 already made BJP 29, so they became one more than the Congress party, this coalition. Then they got the low and TMC guy to defect. Lok LJP member obviously supported NDA. One independent defected, and they got an MLA to defect from the Congress as well. In fact, he was a minister for a long time, for more than 3 years in this cabinet, until he was disqualified. So all this took place and BJP rigged together a majority. So people still think that, look, if Congress party last time had 28, BJP had 21. That means Congress party had 33% more than BJP. And yet BJP formed the government, given the clout that they have at the center, in the northeast. Also the skills of Jugaad, skills of Himanta Biswa Sharma, who coordinates NDA in the northeast. They will be able to somehow form the government unless the Congress party gets a very safe majority, which is something that nobody is quite wagering on right now, also because nobody quite knows. And it is not a uniform electorate because many different parties are in the fray. NPP, I told you, NPF. NPP is a very interesting party. NPP is National People's Party. It's also the only party founded in the Northeast which has a national party status, because it's not confined to Meghalaya, where it was founded by Purno Sangma, formerly of Congress Party, Speaker of Lok Sabha, and then leader of NCP. He was expelled from NCP in 2013 in Meghalaya. He formed NPP. It has a national party status because it now has presence in many states. It had these 4 MLAs in Manipur. It's also had MLAs in other states. It's had one in Arunachal Pradesh, for example. Now you might say only one, but that's one more state. It has one in Nagaland, so that is yet another state. And also at least once it had an MLA elected in Rajasthan as well. So right now Meghalaya, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal, 4 states, it has presence. So it has a national party status. Interestingly, in this election, they are not contesting as partners of the BJP. In fact, BJP does not have any coalition partners. So NPP is contesting by itself and is contesting in 40 seats. Last time they contested in 9 and they won 4. This time they are contesting in 40. I suspect the calculation is on the part of BJP and NDA also that whatever votes they take essentially will be the votes which might have gone to the Congress party, particularly say in the tribal areas. So it's good to have them as a spoiler, and whatever number of seats they get, they will be part of NDA anyway. They will have no choice because they also are running a government in Meghalaya in partnership with NDA, plus who wants to be at odds with the central government with such a brute majority right now. Not a party that basically runs or owns a tiny state called Meghalaya. So they have a footprint here. So these are the main parties in the fray, and of course Congress is there. Now the important thing here is to understand Manipur and Manipur's complexity and Manipur's diversity. Among all the tribal states of the Northeast, Manipur is in some ways the most diverse. Now Arunachal Pradesh has many different tribes, but it is almost entirely tribal. Nagaland, we once explained to you, has 25 plus Naga tribes or sub-tribes depending on how you define them. But it's still a tribal state. It's almost fully a tribal state. Manipur, on the other hand, is fascinatingly different. So Manipur has the big valley, the Imphal Valley, which is mostly inhabited by Meiteis. Meiteis are an ethnicity. Most of the Meiteis are Hindus. Most are Hindus. Then a sizable chunk, about 10% of them, practice what is called Sanmahism. Now, Sanmahism is a kind of pre-Hindu way of worship, which is worship the sun, worship your ancestors, etc. So, not classically Hindu, but Sanmahism. That is about 10% of the Meitei population. If you look at the Meitei population by itself, it's 53% of all of Manipur. And about 41% of Manipur is tribal. But tribes also are divided in many. So plains people, the Meiteis, also have one community of Meitei Muslims. The total population of Manipur, about 8% is Muslim. Most of them are Meiteis. They are also called Meitei Pangals. Meitei Hindus are almost all Vaishnavite Hindus. And the story goes that the king of Manipur in 1704 embraced Hinduism. In fact, the name of the king in 1704 was King Chirai Rongba, and he converted to Hinduism or embraced Vaishnavite Hinduism, declared that to be the religion of the state. It was a kingdom, and renamed itself, took the name of Pitambar Singh. That's the history. Now there are many people in Manipur who contested this and who still contest this and who say we want to go back to our ancient religion. And that little tussle goes on. That's the reason I said about 10% of the Metis follow Sanmahism, which is the pre-Hindu form of worship. Of course, a lot of the classical Hindus will say, what is the difference between other Hinduism and worshipping planetary objects, or going to groves and worshipping to your deities or your ancestors, right? So that is the debate that's going on, and that's what makes the place even more complex and interesting. Again, of the tribals, the largest group are the Nagas. So 24% of Manipur's population is Nagas of various types. Now Nagas, essentially the two big groups are Tangkhuls in Ukhrul area and Maos in Senapati area, which borders Nagaland. In fact, when you drive from Imphal to Kohima, the capital of Nagaland, then you go through a very picturesque area which is in Senapati district. That is the Mao area. And that is the area which had a big trucking blockade not a long time back. So these 24% of the population is Naga. About 15% is Mizo tribes and sub-tribes of various types. They're called Zo, they're called Zomi. For example, say Maricom is one from among them. And you see many other sporting stars from the state. You see many hockey stars. It's impossible almost to set up an Indian hockey team, men or women's, without having somebody from Manipur. And then you see Maricom, and then Dinko Singh, who won the Asiad gold, Mirabai Chanu, the weightlifter, and so many others. So Manipur also has a big sporting strength and a big sporting contribution. So 24% Nagas, about 15% Mizos, Zos, Zomis, tribes, sub-tribes, because Manipur borders Mizoram, Nagaland, Assam, and large tracts of Burma or Myanmar. And other tribes, mainly Kukis. Kukis are about 2%. Kukis are scattered in all tribal states of the northeast. So in Manipur, they might be about 2%, but they are quite progressive, well educated, and quite prominent. So you will find that in your public debate and discussions, many Kuki names keep popping up. Now, the language of Manipur is Manipuri, which was originally called Methi Lawn. So a lot of people speak it, a very large majority speak it, but all the tribes have their own distinct languages also. Manipur also has a very interesting and complex history of becoming a part of India. Manipur had been a kingdom in some form or the other for almost 3,500 years. Going back to 1500 BC, you find some records. Now, it's not as if they've had a continuing kingdom there. There were long stretches, maybe even 1,000 years in the BC period, say from 1200 to BC to about 200 AD, when place remained nearly ungoverned. But you still have records of 107 or 108 kings or rulers in this period. As we mentioned to you, 1704 is when the ruler here became Hindu and he changed his name, and since then the rulers have been Vaishnavite Hindus. In 1930s, until 1930s, this was almost a part of the Burma province or the Burma region of combined India, when the British ruled all of India, including Burma. 1930s, when the British were separating Burma, they were dividing up the subcontinent because they knew that at some stage soon they will have to give independence to India. So they wanted to leave it, quote unquote, manageable, in a manageable size to suit them. That is when the Manipuri rulers began to get worried that they should not be sent and made a part of Burma. So they petitioned the British that they wanted to remain a part of Britain, and it's usually happened in most states in India. There was an Anglo-Manipur war earlier on, which the British won, and after that they sort of made a subsidiary alliance with Manipur and made it like a quasi-independent princely state. So the British controlled its foreign policy, its defense, etc. The usual stuff they did everywhere, including in Northwest Frontier Province. So that's what they had done. Now, the king there, Manipur, because people were very aware, they were demanding democracy. So king was talking about it. Then the World War came and all the confusion came. Then World War ended and the king again had to make a decision. And India then gave that option. In fact, it was option given to everybody, all princely states, go to India or Pakistan, stay independent. So there were a lot of people in Manipur who thought they might want to remain independent. The king himself signed an instrument of accession with India. That instrument of accession was signed in April 1947. So Manipur became a part of India, but initially Manipur became what was then called a Part C state in 1949. So it had an elected government, elected assembly, but the king continued to be the ruler until 1955, when that situation changed. Now, there is a bit of a folklore to this, because it does seem, and you know, Sardar Patel is the one who was, quote unquote, persuading the state rulers to sign the instruments of accession. So the story, the folklore is that the Maharaja at that point, Buddha Chandra, he was summoned to Shillong, which was the kind of capital of the Northeast, and coerced into signing the instrument of accession. So there were political forces in Manipur which never accepted that. Over time, they become less and less numerous, but at various points of time, they become violent. There is a separatist streak in some parts of the population, and at various points of time, insurgencies have come up. So the big insurgencies came up in late 1970s. That was the most fraught period in the Northeast. So 1977, 1978, that is when the big groups, PLA-M, People's Liberation Army of Manipur, they were trained by the Chinese, and they'd gone to Tibet, they'd been trained by the Chinese. They were founded by a man called Nami Rakpam Bisheshwar Singh, and they took the name PLA as well. So they were the strongest group in Manipur, essentially consisting of Meitei Manipuris, which is the majority. The other group also, major group, which was a Meitei group, was PREPP. PREPP was People's Revolutionary Party of Kanglipak. That was formed by a man called Tula Chandra Singh, I think in 1974, and he continued on. It was quite active for a long time until Tula Chandra was killed. His full name was R.K. Tula Chandra Singh, and you will find this R.K. with many Manipuri names. Usually it means Rajkumar. So Rajkumar Tula Chandra Singh. In 1974, he notionally founded PREPP. By 1977, it had begun to become active. 1985, he was killed in an encounter with the army, and since then PREPP sort of went downhill and broke up into various different brigands and groups who worked on extortion, blackmail, smuggling, etc., etc. PLA itself, the PLA chief Bisheshwar Singh was caught by the army. Finally, nobody could prosecute him successfully. The only case government was able to file against him in a court of law was that he tried to murder or kill the young army officer who had captured him. The young army officer was then Lieutenant Cyrus Pithavla, who I think rose to be a Lieutenant General. I remember I went to Army War College in Mao and I saw his name on one of those boards there. He got decorated for that encounter, but that charge was never going to stick. Ultimately, Bisheshwar Singh joined the mainstream like many other insurgents, even got elected MLA. So PLA also declined after that. But since then, some little groups have remained active, particularly in the tribal hill areas. And it's one of those groups we saw recently that killed that Assam Rifles commandant with his family. So this bit of unrest goes on, and that's why there are constant demands for removing AFSPA, and with the government claiming that they need AFSPA in many districts, armed forces claiming they need AFSPA in many districts. In 2004, there was that infamous incident when Manorma Devi was allegedly raped by Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles is not the army, it's a paramilitary force. And there was that naked protest by Manipuri women. After that, Manipur was rid of the Disturbed Areas Act. So Manipur was no longer a disturbed area. Between 1980 and 2004, it was a disturbed area. But AFSPA still prevails in many areas of Manipur, and that demand still is something that is shared by all parties. BJP is very cagey about this. They say we'll do what is best given the situation and the time. So it's in this environment that this election is taking place. And once again, see the complexity there. There is the BJP, National Party, Congress, the National Party. Every other party now, except the BJP, is fully committed to demanding the removal of AFSPA. There are parties which are local, which have tribal loyalties, and in the middle of all this, there is also NPP, National People's Party. That is the Sangma family's party. Conrad Sangma, the Chief Minister of Meghalaya, is its chief, and that party is fully committed not just to the lifting of AFSPA, but also is fully opposed to Citizenship Amendment Act. It doesn't stop it from remaining a member of the NDA or an ally of the BJP. So it has major differences, for example, not just on AFSPA and CAA, but also say beef ban, because the tribal states treat beef as part of their staple diet and they will not accept any restriction on beef trade and also on the transportation of bovine. So it's in all this complexity that this fascinating election is taking place. So I thought it's unlikely that you will read very much about it or you will see very much about it. And do you really care what's happening in constituency 1, constituency 2, constituency 3? So this is a good time for us to learn a little bit about one of our most fascinating and most talented and diverse states in the country.